we have these historical estates that are such an important part of London, but then we have these newer kind of estates like Canary Wharf, King's Cross, now Earls Court in development. And there are many reasons why this is a good model to follow on these large projects.
In this episode, we go behind the scenes of how major regeneration projects really get delivered, how they change the face of London, and what the outside world usually doesn't see. My guest is Tarek Jumah, a chartered surveyor and development professional with over 12 years of experience across the UK and London markets. Most recently as Senior Development Manager at Earls Court Development Company, where he played a key role in one of London's most exciting regeneration schemes. So thank you, Tarek, for coming here. And I would actually start from London itself and how the city is being shaped today. So what do you think are the most important challenges that London is facing at the moment?
Nice to be here. Thanks for thanks for inviting me. I think just talking about London, one of the things that I think about is how it sits within the context of the wider UK and the focus of, let's say, delivering 1.5 million homes over this current government's target. London carries a big part of that, and I think roughly London would need to be providing over 85,000 homes, I think 88,000 homes maybe a year in order to meet that target. So clearly that's just an aspirational thing.
Yeah.
But I think it just gives an idea of the scale of what needs to be happening here in London. And then, you take that and you put on top of it the fact that London is an expensive place to do business. It's a expensive place to build. And it is a really, complex, historic city where there are opportunities, but also there's been, years and years of development. So, opportunities are maybe not as frequent. You've got all these large scale projects that, I've been involved in one of them, for example, and I think that is really key to unlocking delivery of not just housing, but other real estate in London. So the challenge is how to get these projects going, because they're a lot more complicated than maybe it seems.
Yeah, so talking about the target, indeed, as you mentioned, we are supposed to be delivering, it was around 300,000 new homes a year, of which 80,000, just in London. I think we are probably not even at a quarter of that target reached, even in London, but I think in the UK as well. So still, I think this is an ambition, but we are very far from what we should get. And do you think it is reasonable to lower the expectation? And what would be the market be doing over the next years if we don't manage to go even close to that?
Yeah, it's not achievable. I think that's obvious. I think it's an aspiration, and these targets can be set, but it's just not in touch with the reality of, particularly, I think, the complexities of navigating the planning system and getting a planning consent, and dealing with all the viability issues that projects have been facing in London. So, you get the planning permission, but is it actually going to get funded and delivered? So to get to these numbers, so many assumptions probably have been made that I would say are quite challenging to meet. But regardless, great to have a big goal and achieve as close to it as possible. We're definitely not even. I think last year, in the first quarter of last year, there were 70% of the boroughs in London had 0 home starts.
Yes.
Yeah, is that
that was
gone around?
Yeah, it was around 3 out of 4 boroughs in London. Yeah.
So imagine
0
that's
start,
where we are.
Despite money in the market, despite that. So despite investment, for example, the build-to-rent sector had seen a deployment of more than £5 billion last year. But this is, of course, totally like in contrast with the actual new starts compared to the previous years. And but despite that, how do you think London has changed over the past years with these new development schemes around the city?
I mean, London is like looking at pictures, even just going around. I've been living in this city for 13 years. I know I've recently spent some time with people who have been here decades previously and now here. Like the city is constantly reinventing itself, and as a global capital, it will continue to be doing that. Probably, the mix of, there's definitely been some challenges that London had to face in the last 10 years. A lot of businesses have opened up, presence in mainland Europe. People have, some, perhaps there's been a population of Europeans who are no longer present in London, but it
Yeah.
has attracted others. I think
Yeah.
there's been a growth in a more globally international presence in London, and that is evident. So people from the States, from Asia, India, China. Um, London also has delivered, in my opinion, one of the best examples of like urban regeneration
Mhm.
recently. Actually, too. So kind of the way that the legacy of the Olympic Games has been handled is, there's a lot that can be talked about, and in such a complex project, there's always going to be pros and cons, and things that have gone wrong. But it's you compare it to some other cities around the world, and now it's a thriving. Even I live in that neighborhood. That's a great example. The King's Cross development by Argent is a fantastic example of how to do urban regeneration right.
Yeah.
And so, London is, showing other global cities how to do these big
Yeah.
regenerations
Regeneration
and
project.
reinventing yourself constantly. Canary Wharf is doing that right now. It's been like this business district for years and years and years, and now people live there, people go there for leisure. So, I think London continues to reinvent itself as it always
Are you talking
has
about the
done.
King's Cross regeneration project? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And Canary Wharf as well. So the Canary Wharf estate obviously was very commercially led, all
Yeah.
offices. And since the pandemic, there's been this shift to try and make it into a more mixed use environment. There's been, housing that's been built there. There's leisure, and now it's a much more mixed use environment, which I think, the post-pandemic world has shown us is what people would enjoy in cities right now. Just a more mixed-use environment, and also access to open space. So I guess what I'm trying to say is London is still reinventing itself, even though these challenges are present.
So these are the actual projects that really have the power to change the shape of the city. We cannot rely on smaller developments, right?
I don't think that's true. I think there is a role for smaller projects to be played. Infill sites need to be unlocked, like also other assets, like for example the national railways, the Arch Company. That's a great use of derelict real estate that now brings life to London. But when we're talking about like how the city is shaping itself
Yeah.
and how these big goals of like the housing crisis and housing numbers, the numbers will have to be delivered by these large scale projects. Like
Yeah.
the project I was working on um, aims to deliver over 4,000
Yeah.
homes.
And exactly that's where I wanted to go. So to read some numbers of the Earls Court project you were involved in, we are talking about more than 40 acres of land, 4,000 homes, 4,000 new homes, 12,000 jobs expected, 2.5 million of square feet of workspace, 20 acres of public green areas, right? And plus even 3 cultural venues planned. So let's try to describe what was it. What is this new project in Ars Court?
Yeah, I mean, it was a great, like, it was such a cool experience actually for me to be involved in that project. I learned a lot. And it's fascinating because the scale is unlike anything I had been involved with before, and the complexity. We can
Yeah.
talk about that as well. This is all public information. There's a great exhibition that also people can visit, by the way, over at Earls Court. And I know they run open tours that I used
Yeah.
to lead, but
Because
you know,
they're
you can go
trying
and
to
visit.
involve the actual public.
Yeah,
Yeah,
big
yeah,
time. It's a huge part of what
yeah,
ECDC does and does greatly is the community involvement, and I think we should, you know, go deeper on that. But
yeah.
the project is has a patchy history because it used to be the Earls Court
Yeah.
Exhibition
We,
Center,
we, we
very
remember, very
famous.
famous for concerts
Yeah,
in the
yeah. So
70s.
Bombay Bicycle Club were the last band
Yeah.
who played there, but bigger names have performed there. Pink
Yeah,
Floyd,
Queen.
Queen, yeah, everyone, you know, when we were there talking to the
Yeah,
community, everyone has memories of like
yeah,
gigs and the whole area, Earls Court, relied on that exhibition center, the shops, the, you know, footfall. And so when that was
close. No.
demolished as part of a larger master plan at the time,
Yeah.
which never came forward because it ran into some, you know,
When was it? When
difficulties.
was this demolished? Was it in the
It
year
was around 2013.
2013? Yeah.
But that master plan, which included the two social housing estates on the western edge of the site, never
Hmm.
really came forward properly
Yeah.
for various reasons that are too long to get into. But the kind of group of companies that are behind ECDC stepped in late 2019,
Mm.
and the estates were handed back to the council. So they're no longer part of the site. And this 44-acre site was remaster planned from first principles, taking a lot of learnings from the pandemic that was happening in
Yeah.
real time. And that's what I was touching on earlier with the public space. And as you said, like almost half of the site is
Green space.
publicly accessible
Yeah.
space, including a new park, which is one of the most important things that the local community wanted.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the project had to deliver the numbers um, for viability reasons, but also to deliver what the local area needs. So 4,000 homes up to 2.5 million square feet, which would put it as a new kind of business district for West London at a time where, you know, people have been having conversations about the office market. Is it dead? Is it
Yeah.
changing? And actually, the focus here is really about the flight to quality and delivering, you know, grade A office buildings that are very much in
Mm.
demand in London, unlike, you know, maybe poorer quality offices, which have definitely suffered.
Yeah.
So the project is it is a transformational project for that part of the city, but also for London more broadly. It's a landmark project that would put the city on the map yet again. Similar to the King's Cross one, which, you know, is
Yeah.
virtually finished now, and there are other big projects like this that are contributing to like the reshaping of London, like Canada Water,
Yeah.
which British Land are delivering, which is another 67 acres. Argent are of course doing another project in Brent Cross, which is delivering thousands of homes and workspaces.
Yeah.
Old Oak, which, you know, is like
Oh yeah.
massive,
We'll go to that.
8,000
Yeah. Yeah.
homes. So
We'll go
all
to
of
that.
these, you know, there's other projects that are going on. Silvertown, which Lend-Lease are leading, you know, again, thousands of homes. Like these are all the big kind of projects that are need to transform the areas for everyone's benefit, but also deliver the homes
Yeah.
that are needed.
So I believe you were involved in the planning phase because it's still, of course, at the planning phase, and this is actually across two different boroughs, and I think this involved sort of a lot of challenges as well. Correct?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's hard because as like again, this is the public information about the fact that you there are two planning applications.
Yeah.
You know, because each council had to have a application lodged to it, which, you know, tells you that there was a whole series of pre-apps and documentation and everything had to be run in parallel. Certain policies between the two councils don't speak to each other. And then, of course, you also have to take into consideration the GLA and the London plan and how you
The
navigate
Greater
all of
London
this.
Authority.
Yeah, so the mayor's office, and the London plan, and then you have the local plans from each local authority, which, in certain respects didn't focus on the same things, perhaps. And so, as a developer trying to, deliver a coherent project,
Yeah.
which is just one thing, it's not seen as like this side and that side, but then you have to go through the
Yeah.
process twice. It was definitely a challenge, and it added time. It added time to the process.
And in those sort of projects, the residential part of it, of course, plays a very important role, as we said before, because we need new homes. But is there, of course, an affordability quota as well? Correct? Yeah.
So you mean like
Yeah,
affordable
affordable
housing?
homes. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And it's a very important thing, because at the end, like, we can't just deliver not just any project. It's okay delivering housing, but actually you got to deliver the type of housing that people
Yeah.
need, right? And that's why these policies exist.
Because I imagine it still being like a very expensive area of London.
Yeah.
I think it won't be for everyone.
No, but like the affordable housing,
Yeah.
within that, there's again going to be a split between intermediate housing and social
Yeah.
housing, and that's again differs between the two local authorities. But yeah, let's be honest, things are kind of challenging at the moment for
Yeah.
all projects in
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
London. So you've got rising construction costs, you've
Yeah.
got the interest rate stuff that have happened, you've got global uncertainty, which means that investors are maybe not as fast acting as previous eras. And you've got to deliver on the affordable housing requirements, you've got to deliver on the building safety requirements, which is also
Yeah.
adds time and cost because it's taking longer than it should at the moment.
So in terms of, I mean, without even going specifically on this one, but if you wanna cite this as an example, uh, how are these projects structured financially? So it's usually joint ventures, right?
It differs, yeah. So actually, just going back, like
Yeah.
previously, my experience was also working, delivering student housing projects all around London and the UK, and that was delivered as a joint venture. So a kind of LP and a GP coming together, kind of pari passu equity, and then development finance was taken out on a case by case project, on a case by case basis. And in that way, we delivered at the time over 2,000 student beds, which were all owned and operated kind of as one thing. So that's one way to deliver it. But this the bigger projects, often in this case, it's a sort of public and private sectors coming together, because the Earls Court site is part owned by Transport for London,
Yeah.
and then the private sector side is Delancey and APG.
Okay.
And so this is the site ownership, and they've been leading the whole thing to date.
Instead, like talking about build to rent, what do you think and what do you expect from this specific market over the next years?
Build to rent, but also I think the other, let's say, operational types of
Yeah.
living sectors, so co-living and student accommodation, have been picking up more and more of the overall portion of, like, let's say, the living sector in the UK. I think that trend is going to continue happening. Actually, like within build to rent, there's a whole growth now going on with the single family housing, which is a new thing for the UK. So actually homes
Yeah.
that are being built to rent, not just
Yes, yes.
apartments. But just focusing on London for now, I think the build to rent,
Which are becoming actually like an institutional investment now.
single family housing, whole neighborhoods. But just focusing, I guess, on London, then the urban
Yeah, that's not London,
scale
right?
means
Yeah.
that the apartments are more relevant. Um, I think they're going to continue to grow. They're going to make a big part of, like, big master plans and things like that. I personally sometimes wonder, like like a lot of them are quite expensive.
Mm.
And like just on a simplistic level here, not like not anything complex. Like if when you do these appraisals, you do like a pound per square foot, and you're like,
Mm.
oh yeah, it's okay. But then when you apply, like you look at the actual per calendar month rent on some of
Yeah.
these, it's really, really high. And I sometimes wonder, are they
Oh, you
gonna?
mean
It's
high
expensive.
for building, or you're talking about then tenants, for the tenants?
I'm thinking about it a little bit from the tenant's
Tenant
perspective,
perspective, yeah.
and like,
I mean, it's expensive for both anyway.
yeah. But also building it, yeah, creating it is expensive
Yeah.
and everything. And so, it's it makes me wonder whether there's going to be a market for a slightly more affordable type of product, because at the moment
Yeah.
everything is about like heavily amenitized,
Yeah,
heavily
luxury.
luxury, hospitality, gym, very pretty on Instagram, and that's all great.
And very high operating costs
Very
as
high
well.
operating costs, and it's like a hospitality thing, and then it's like it's amazing, but then like
Who's gonna pay for that?
who's going to pay for that? And then if you're like, why isn't there a more, maybe I should do this, just slightly more bare bones.
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, there is a cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
There's this squeezed middle. Like, yeah, it's great having all the amenities, but like, does it I think we need to be a bit more nuanced about like the type of product that is delivered,
Yeah,
because
more sustainable, like even
yeah,
like financially.
and that was also the whole, one of the big focuses in my student accommodation era was that under the Future Generation kind of brand was it's still a great place to live, and it is like affordable luxury. That was kind of something we talked about, like you have all the amenities and it looks fantastic, but it doesn't, it still needs to be accessible,
Yeah.
and it still needs to be affordable
And viable also
and viable.
for developers.
Yeah,
Because
of course.
again, let's face it, is it easy to develop today?
No, and actually, like that's something I was thinking about earlier this morning. Like, I think there's this perception that like, oh, the developers are like screwing everyone over and making loads of money. Like, actually, it's so difficult to develop at the moment, and that means like a lot of projects aren't actually viable.
Yeah,
They're not
and some have been developed at a loss.
Yeah, and some have been developed at a loss, or things have changed. Regulations have changed, and so it's not even like this is more of an education piece for people who are not in the sector. It's like just things are tough. It's not that it's. I'm not saying that there aren't things that I would change about the development. There are a lot, but maybe that's another conversation about the development industry and the way developers operate. But like, they too are struggling because of all the cumulative effect of all the challenges.
What do you think is actually the hardest part for your experience? You're more like the planning side, or is more like the construction cost and viability?
What's the hardest?
Yeah.
I would say that navigating the planning system is pretty challenging, especially on large scale projects in London. Like, it's really complicated.
So this doesn't really add up, no? Why? Because we have targets from one side,
Yeah, right.
and on the other hand, I mean, it's still difficult. So okay, yeah, we know that there have been changes in legislation recently, this new grey belt, etc. But probably, is it enough?
Well, if it was enough, I guess we would be having different stats on delivery. Yeah, it is paradoxical to have such lofty targets and then such a complex system that you have to navigate through in order to be able to do that. And this is something that's been talked about, so often, but like, I haven't really seen huge change that enables, large scale delivery, at least even in certain areas. And it's also really expensive. And this is money that developers have to spend at risk because you don't have planning. Perhaps investors are not going to back you on these fees which will add up to millions of pounds just to get a permit. So this is, something that you would have to
No, and especially the challenges for smaller developers, of
Yeah,
course, where at least like big ones can afford some initial costs, but smaller ones can't really. So,
yeah. And what if you don't get the permission?
yeah,
Then, that's just like, you're just writing off that cost, or you're going to appeal it, and that's more cost and
yeah.
time.
Yeah, so going back to the build to rent, so you think this can be actually one of the solutions and answers to like to the delivery of new homes in the future? Like just because probably the financial model is slightly different, no?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's important also, just as a side point, it's important from a kind of makeup of the city, because I think it is one way that at least there are some sort of communities that are being created in these buildings, through the activation of the spaces. And people really need that. Like, people need community. Like, how often, I've lived in apartment blocks in the past, normal, you know, built for sale apartments, and it's like I didn't even know my neighbors, and
Yeah.
it's just not a very human way to live. So I think built to rent, things like built to rent, co-living, student housing are helping address that as well, which is something that maybe our society needs. But yeah, it is definitely part of the solution. It's also a great way to just intensify and densify urban locations, because you have lots of apartments in this in the same volume, slightly smaller, particularly on the co-living, which I've been following for years now, and it's
Mm.
like it's nice to see that it's being delivered. I know there was the whole thing with the collective, and then everyone was like,
Yeah.
co-living, but I personally still think it's a really uh, useful thing to have within the wider mix.
Yeah, you mentioned one of the large scale co-living,
Yeah.
of course, models and operators, but of course, it's also something that at a more medium lower scale can still be probably even more viable because, as we mentioned before, all these like sort of amenities and costs that cannot be like sort of sustained for a long term sometimes have an impact as well, while probably smaller scales can perform sometimes even better. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and sometimes that means you might have to deal with slightly less regulation, or you
Yeah.
go through planning much quicker. There's a lot to be said about the nimbleness of a smaller scale project, because whilst these huge projects are, let's say, the way to deliver the national targets and the city targets, they could they you know it's obvious that they might end up being more political than a smaller project, or
Yeah.
get stuck in big kind of stuff, whereas a smaller project could be more nimble and just get through and
Yeah.
actually deliver. So
Yeah.
there's a lot to be
It's
said
never
to that.
it's never that easy,
No, no, I'm not,
but
but
but yeah, easier for sure. Yeah,
potentially, yeah.
easier for sure.
Another thing, sorry, I'm jumping around, but
Yeah.
like another thing just on this living sectors that I think we should mention is later living, or like retirement
Oh
homes,
yes.
because like the population in the UK is
Yeah.
aging. There's a lot of people downsizing from like large homes
Yeah.
and looking for a more easy, let's say, way to spend old age. And there's been a few really beautiful later living buildings that have been delivered in
Mm.
London, and there's more that
So
are in the pipeline.
let's explain for people who don't know this model. What is it like exactly?
So essentially, it's living communities aimed at people above a certain age,
Yeah.
maybe 55, 60, and they're really popular in other countries, like in Australia. I think they're
Yeah.
really really big,
No.
and here in the UK, they've been growing in popularity progressively over the last many years. And typically, it's a highly amenitized kind of facility. It's not a care home,
Yeah. Yeah.
still like C3 mostly, so it's
Okay.
residential.
Residential planning
Yeah,
use. Yeah.
mostly, but it's heavily amenitized, it's aimed at a certain demographic, and in the same way that you have, students living in purpose-built student
Hmm.
housing, you have, older populations living in community
So,
with
so
each
there are
other.
like specific services targeted for older,
Yeah, and it's designed in,
yeah,
so
in a
the
way.
type of amenities, whether it's hydrotherapy or,
Yeah.
physical therapy or, also open space, sometimes combined with like, outdoors gardens. It's a really cool type of housing that I think we need to throw into that mix when we talk about these alternative
Yeah.
residential uses.
I was just trying to have your opinion on where do you think London is strongest in terms of like the delivery?
I think just off the top of my head, London is again, it's historically, a really safe place to invest. It's a welcoming like place. It's very diverse and multicultural, and it has this ability to reinvent itself. And I think that is one of the strongest points of London is this flexibility and ability to reinvent itself. So the opportunities that are going to come up in these, large scale projects downstream, but also these individual kind of smaller lots or converting, railways, like it's a place where people come to be more creative, to do different things, and there is room for people to do that. But also like it is a world capital as we mentioned before, and so there's always going to be um,
Investments.
an
Yeah.
international interest in investing in London, in owning a part of London, in contributing to the shaping of the city. Like it's got, a fantastic public transport. It
Yeah.
sounds like a detail, but it's not because it's, we're talking also about sustainability and, reducing reliance on cars. And actually, that is an important thing. So it's a progressive city, and whilst having such a complicated planning system is challenging, it also means it is clear and there is a clear regulatory framework. There isn't the uncertainty that maybe in other locations you have, which is
Yeah.
like perhaps political uncertainty, regulatory uncertainty, which can put investors off. I'm not saying there aren't other challenges, and for example, the Building Safety Act is one of these where people who are not well versed in the UK are like, well, maybe we're going to wait to see what happens because this is taking way longer. But by and large, London is a place where investors know how to operate, and that I think gives people confidence, and that keeps London as a very competitive city or place to invest. One of the things that is really important, I think, to think about is why having a kind of master plan approach or
Yeah.
a larger scale kind of focus, or an estate, let's say, is really important. And actually, there's a really good book that was published by the NLA about this called The Great Estates or London's Great Estates, something like this. It would be good to check that out, and it explains how the concept of these estates is very much part of London's history. Like, we have the Grosvenor Estate, we have the Crown
Yeah.
Estate, we have these historical estates that are such an important part of London. But then we have these newer kind of estates like Canary Wharf, King's Cross,
Mm.
now Earls Court in development. And there are many reasons why this is a good model to follow on these large projects. Number one for me is the fact that when you are thinking about a whole estate, you are taking a long-term vision. So you're not in it for the short term, which means that you avoid some of the sometimes
Yeah.
more opportunistic, let's say, approach that some developers might take,
Yeah.
whereas like you get into an area,
Yeah. Or
you
they
have
have to take it
they have
because they
to
are too
make, yeah,
small to
because
afford.
exactly that's a better
Yeah.
way to put it. Thank you. They're forced to be very opportunistic and
Yeah.
aggressive because otherwise they wouldn't survive in this environment. But that leaves the local communities very disadvantaged, and that also potentially just leads to worse off outcomes from a urban planning and design perspective and quality. So taking a long-term vision, very important. Um, Sustainability. So, when you're talking about 40,
Yeah.
50 buildings all together, you can then do things like have a whole heat network, a whole, heating network that does heating and cooling in a way that conserves energy or relies on, connects the buildings to each other, that you just don't have the same ability to do that when you're dealing with one individual plot. So, you can achieve a more sustainable outcome altogether. Definitely the ability to create a mixed use environment and actually
Mm.
respond to what the area needs and also what the local community wants.
Yeah.
So, you have public open space, but you also have living in all the different types of living, but also you have work, you have leisure. So it's a kind of all inclusive, let's say like the whole
It's basically,
15-minute
yeah,
city idea,
it's like basically having these new cities within a city.
Yeah, and like, yeah, where you can just cycle, you can
Yeah.
walk, this is like the utopian view. But the idea is, yeah, you have everything at your
Yeah.
doorstep, which means that it's a all-encompassing community,
Yeah.
and people feel at home, but also when they come to work, they feel like this is a lively place. It's not just a place that people come to work and then leave. So the ability to create that is another benefit of taking this more, master planned approach. And then there's the kind of long-term, the long-term vision, from the outset, but then the
Mm.
actual stewardship and, operation of the place, because like real estate is more and more operational. So
Yeah.
it's not just about, building something and then it's finished.
And
It's
live it. Yeah.
also how you operate it, how you run it, how you staff it, the management team, keeping spaces clean, maintaining them, and keep the upkeep of it is super important. And, you keep something, you build something, but then you operate it and you maintain it in the right way. So you're invested in it in the long term. And just the scale, I think, allows you to do more things for the local community. You can provide, community centers. You can
Yeah.
provide what is needed, whether it's a GP surgery or a nursery.
Okay.
You have more flex that way.
Yeah, and yeah, I've seen some of these really like huge regeneration schemes. There is one in particular, the Old Dock Common and Park Royal, which is probably supposed to be one of the biggest in the country
Yeah,
ever,
yeah.
probably. Yeah. I don't know if you are familiar with it, but it's something like, incredible.
It is huge. I think it's like set to deliver 8,000 plus homes, which is like, if you think about it, that's like a small town,
Yeah.
you know?
Oh, yeah.
Uh, and yeah, it's a remarkable project. Like I don't know the ins and out of it, but I've
Yeah.
I've been around the site once, and it's incredibly large.
Yeah, and
Always
it's in
very
between three
complicated.
different boroughs there.
Yeah, three different boroughs. I mean, it has its own development corporation,
Yeah.
like the LLDC was in the Olymp, which gives you an idea of just
Yeah.
how big this is. But yeah, this is a great way to transform, land into a much more active use where there's going to be communities living, families growing up, people working. But yeah, it's a very long-term project with lots
Yeah.
of ups and downs, as you would imagine, at this scale.
And in terms of your career, like sort of your role as as a development manager, uh, if you had to give a piece of advice to a new generation that want to enter this sort of career, what would you generally say?
It's a good question. I think, uh, I guess this applies to everything, but I'm talking from my experience. You have to, you have to focus on people and people skills. Like at the end of the day, I feel like someone has said this before. I'm sure someone said it, but
Just to get an idea of the background first. So,
yeah,
how do you actually get into the profession?
me. Okay,
Yeah.
do you want the long story or the short
Oh,
story?
yeah, whatever.
Uh, um, Okay, so I was actually born. I was born in Syria actually. I grew up in Saudi Arabia, and I moved here to study engineering when I was 18, and I studied civil engineering. But civil
Okay, so you
engineering,
have a technical
I have a
background. Yeah.
technical background, but I never practiced as an engineer
Okay.
because it was too technical for me. So I ended up doing a master's degree here in London at UCL in kind of project construction, project management. And I got into this by my first job was actually working for a surveying firm.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent about 4 years there. The first half of these was spent going through the RICS kind of APC
Yeah.
rigorous process. So I became a chartered surveyor, project management surveyor. And I spent a lot of my years there doing like fund monitoring, so advising senior debt providers on their loans, which gave me a unusual understanding of the wider property development cycle compared to maybe just like a
Yeah.
construction project manager, which is very
Yeah.
much delivery focused. And having that experience allowed me to then transition to the client side, so to speak, where I spent again 3-4 years delivering the student housing portfolio at my second role, and from there moved on to the kind of front end master plan role that I got exposure to at Earls Court
Yeah.
more laterally. So, kind of engineering by education, surveying, and then the fund monitoring kind of gave me this wider angle, and then the client side. And I think what I was trying to say earlier is at the end of the day, this is about dealing with people. You're dealing with people not just in your organization, but also
Yeah.
all these like the last project I was working on. I think there were more than 50 companies involved in that project in some capacity,
Mm.
maybe more if I expand the net of who is involved. And I don't know, each company will have anywhere between one to dozens of people depending on their role. So imagine the amount of
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
you're dealing with, the personalities. Then you're dealing with people at the council, you're dealing with politicians, you're dealing with investors. And like we can have all the technical expertise in the world and all the knowledge,
The soft skills sometimes are
but
even more
you're
important
human
in this.
beings
Yeah.
and you're dealing with each
Yeah.
other. And I think like the advice, just to go back to the original question, is don't obviously like you got to know what you're talking about, because if not, people will you're just gonna but that's not enough. You need to be able to get along with people. That doesn't mean to be a pushover. Sometimes you have to be assertive, but it means you need to know how to interact with other people.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, the background is also important. So yeah, it's
Oh
different.
yeah, but it's not enough. I
If the
think if you want to do really well and um, you need to have the soft skills.
Yeah.
And actually, I think like sometimes the soft skills that people you got to be yourself. I think in order to have a good soft skill set, you've got to be true to who you are and come across as the way you are, and not necessarily copy what some random YouTuber or book says is how you should be.
Yeah.
That doesn't like people see right through that, whether it's public speaking or in a meeting or in any context. I think like you just got to be genuine. At least that's what I think.
Yeah.
I know this is not a technical advice, but I think it's super important.
Yeah. So thank you, Tarek, for being here today.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah. And thank you for following.